Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talking About the Big Stuff. I am Michael Cole,
I am being Matt Cravat.
and we are Russian this week because
I'm
we have
Ukrainian,
changed
you
our
pig.
mind. We have changed our mind about what we are. That is the topic
And
for today.
and what we are is what we are, or you what you are, or what.
Yeah. No, I just just felt like I just felt like doing an accent. I
Yeah,
don't know.
knock yourself
Okay.
out.
So
Yes,
I
and
do.
baby.
You're aware that I do voices, uh, and I do them a decent amount at work. Every once in a while, I'll pull out a Kermit or a Cleveland. Have you heard my Cleveland?
Oh, I've heard you, Cleveland.
And I'll pull it out at work, and I got a friend at work, and she was like, you know, you should really go into voice acting. And I was like, oh yeah, I don't know if you know this, but I do a podcast. And she goes, I've got to download it. Fine, I'll download it. I'm like, yeah, I've only been telling you for 6 weeks.
God, you're a white guy in your 30s with a beard. Of course you have a podcast.
Hey, you're a white guy in your 50s without a beard, so
So I've been dragged onto a podcast,
yeah,
kicking and screaming.
yeah. Speaking of kicking and screaming, have you ever seen that movie with Will Ferrell?
Uh, that movie?
Kicking and Screaming.
Oh no, I didn't know there was a movie called Kicking and Screaming.
Yeah, he plays his son's cocker,
His son's
his
cock?
son, his son's soccer coach,
That'd be the
and
coolest thing. This is the
his
story.
son's cock is definitely going
He
in.
died when his son was young, and he was reincarnated as his son's cock.
This is a Patreon exclusive. Um, no, he played his son's soccer coach, and he ends up going up against his dad, who has a new son. So he's got his like half brother, and his dad's Robert Duvall, and they're like, they're like Logan's age, these kids, and they're putting them up against each other in soccer. And his dad is like a psycho, and Will Ferrell plays the Will Ferrell character basically, where he's like pretty lovable, kind of, you know, like maybe we'll get some orange slices kind of goofball. But then in order to compete with his dad, because his dad's been humiliating him his whole life, he goes and he goes a little nuts and goes over the top. He hires Mike Ditka to be his assistant coach because Mike Ditka hates his dad, and Mike Ditka obviously plays himself. And there's like different points in the movie where at one point he's dressed up like Mike Ditka. At one point he's dressed up in like this blue tiger suit and like jump the tracksuit, and he's just being like every obnoxious coach you've ever seen. And I'm coaching Logan's baseball, and I was telling Sarah, I'm like, if I get roped into coaching again next season, every single week I'm going to do a different like famous coach at the game. I'll just show up. And I was like, maybe I'll start off easy, and I'll just mustache, just be Ted Lasso. Get the
You're all
sweater
goldfish.
vest.
You're all goldfish. Keep swimming.
Yeah. And so anyway, I have by the way, I've watched the season finale, or season slash maybe series finale.
Potentially serious. Yeah.
Loved it. Have not edited our episode yet where you had me take my headphones off, so I still don't know what you said. So I'm like, I was during the episode, I was like, does this apply to what we were talking about? And I just couldn't, I didn't pull it out. So
I don't
I'm
remember what we
interested.
were talking about now, so I don't remember what it was.
It was 1 week ago, but it was 4 podcast
I know.
episodes ago. Oh, so Sarah, so Logan used to love this vlogger, Steven Scherer, and he was a guy, and he's like 22, 23, and he was a real goofball, and like he was fine, he was inoffensive, he's a little like, he was just grating, how children's stuff can be. And we watched this video, this ridiculous video, and he kept talking about days as I haven't seen them in 4 vlogs, and he was measuring time by vlogs, and so sometimes Sarah and I will be like, yeah, it's been like 4 vlogs since we've had sex or whatever, and I'm like, when I just thought about like, yeah, it's been 1 week since we had that conversation, but this is it. This is the 3rd or 4th episode that we've recorded since then because we're getting ahead. Also, Sarah's surprised.
I
So
haven't
right
gotten
before
head in like 3 vlogs.
although to be fair, we don't have video on Patreon yet. It'll only be the audio version of Patreon for right now because you have to use Vimeo
Mhm.
for Patreon, and Vimeo is like 12 bucks a month, and I'm like, once we start making the money that I'm not pulling out of my pocket for
Yeah.
everything, we
So
can
that becomes,
we can
a Patreon goal. When we hit this many
yeah,
patrons, we can afford to move to Vimeo and put video on Patreon.
exactly.
A
So
legit, real goal.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that was my thought
So
was
it's
so
funny as you talk about wanting to play different characters as the coach. You've met my brother in arms, my best friend Mikey,
yeah.
at my parties, if nothing else, and we were in the complete works of William Shakespeare abridged together, where all 37 plays are done in 90 minutes,
Hmm.
and the major portion of the first act is Romeo and Juliet, and it was really fun for me because I was the narrator, so I just sat and watched for most of it, and then did little like rhyming pieces to connect the scenes together, while Mikey and Wade played all the other parts, and they had to play everything. And similarly, when we did Hamlet, I played Hamlet, and they played all the other parts. So it was kind of easy show for me, tough for them. Um, but when Mikey was playing the nurse in Romeo and Juliet, and it's a short, bit of it, every night he did it in a different character voice. He did an impersonation of a different thing, like he did Schwarzenegger. He just did Christopher Walken. He did something different every night because he's very good with his voice. And then one night, we can. There's a guy in the audience. We can hear his laugh, and we recognize him as a regular performer at the theater, who actually were while we were doing our last few rehearsals, the next show that was coming up was rehearsing on the dance floor of the theater, and we could hear his voice booming during their table reads early on, and it was pissing Wade off in our group because Wade wanted to be in that show, and they wouldn't let him be in it because he would have had to miss two rehearsals because of our last two rehearsals, and he's like, I'm so much better than that guy, and they cast him rather than just have me miss two rehearsals. And
Yeah.
the guy has a very distinctive voice because he talked like this always. So Mikey comes out with the poison as the nurse, and or as I'm sorry, not when he was the nurse, when he was doing the apothecary, he was doing the apothecary in a different voice every night. So he comes out with the poison, and he turns to Wade as Juliet, and he goes, "Ah, Juliet, drink off this potion, and presently thou shalt feel a cold and drowsy humor in your blood," or something like that. I don't remember the exact quote. And Wade is playing Juliet as a half Valley Girl, half Southern Belle, and he goes, "Oh my, oh well, here I go. Here goes nothing." Drinks it and says, oh no. Suddenly I feel a cold and drowsy humor in my veins. And and Mike was like, I told you. And everybody laughs at the accent, including we hear that guy's laugh from the audience. And we're like, he's the only one who doesn't know. Like anyone who's related to the theater knew that we were doing him. He's the only one who didn't know. But
Nice.
yeah, when I did like a DVD of the show for our own personal use, because we how to record it and sell it or anything like that because we don't own the rights. But there's 3 copies of it. I have it. Mikey has it. Wade has it. 4. Our director has it just for our own purposes. And I did like deleted scenes and show like every version that Mikey did of that with because we improvised at least 10 or 15% of the show every night.
Nice. Yeah. I was in a play senior year of high school, The Boys Next Door. It's a play about 4 mentally handicapped guys living in a home together. Um, and I played the most severely handicapped of the 4. And there was a scene where we're supposed to be moving and like basically we've slowed down while someone is giving a monologue or something. So you're doing all your actions in slow motion, and I get bored. Like we had to like just do your simple thing, whether it was like rocking back and forth in slow motion or whatever you had to do. You had to do it for like a solid like 3 minutes of no, they didn't do that of 3 minutes of monologue or whatever. So every single night I'd find something new to do, and I found one day we're doing it is a dress rehearsal, and I have a stuffed animal. I have like a stuffed bear, and I put the bear on the floor, and I in slow motion start doing the paddles, and I start giving him CPR, and and the director is losing his fucking mind laughing, and he's like, "That's amazing. You're keeping that in. You're doing that every time." And I would get progressively more intense with it every single time. I'd start like crying that we lost him. I would just like get so much more intense with it. And it was a competition show. We were, because there was a Massachusetts high school drama festival, and that was our competition show. And my dad came to see it, and he afterwards he was like, the thing with the bear is hilarious. But I was like, it was amazing. It was the first time I really remember making my dad like laugh, and it was awesome.
So anyway,
So
what's our
anyway,
topic tonight?
our topic tonight will be nepo babies,
Oh, babies, finally.
because yep, because if we plan for nepo babies, we'll never do nepo
So you
babies.
just changed your mind, huh?
I did change. No, we're going to talk about changing. The ability to change your mind is tonight's topic. It's I just think it's an important thing. I think that it kind of goes into a lot of topics we've kind of discussed in the past, whether it's intellectual curiosity. I know you weren't on that episode. It was pre
I,
your
and I didn't go
co-hosting
back and
duties.
listen to it.
You should go back and listen to all the episodes, or at
I'm
least
not that
download
curious
them.
about it. And I downloaded every single one. I downloaded every episode and let it play out, so it would seem like I listened to it. Come on.
Cool, cool. That's
I
what
think,
that's what I do usually.
yeah.
Now I'm doing it on YouTube and my my podcast player, so that we get both. But Um, I just think that the idea of there is a certain level of pride or stubbornness around changing your mind, and this idea of like, well, for some reason we get into the like, well, I didn't want to, and I get it when you're a kid, but you get into this idea of like, I didn't want to do it, so I'm not going to do it. And, um, I was, Sarah, one of Sarah's best friends, and she will admit this. She's really good about admitting this eventually. But like if I told her like, oh, you should go to Mamma Mia Pizza. That's your favorite pizza place, right? Mamma Mia Pizza.
It's been downgraded but because some place opened up a little closer where the owners are from the Bronx, and it's like being in the damn Bronx when you walk in the place.
Okay.
Mommy is still great. It hasn't gotten
Yeah,
worse,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
Mezzaluna is Mezzaluna. Mwah.
Okay. Good to know. I needed another pizza place suggestion, but if we told her, oh, you got to go to Mezzaluna, or you got to go to or Mamma Mia, she'd be like,
I've already
I
decided I
don't
don't like
know.
it, so I'm
I
not
don't.
going to go.
I don't think I'm gonna like it. And it would go on for 2, 3, 4 years, and then she'll be at something where someone brought it for a party or something, and she's not gonna not eat it there, and she would try it, and then there's a period of no, I always liked this. I always knew I would like this, and then eventually, because I can call people out sometimes. I get away with certain things that other people don't get away with, and I'll call her out and I'll be like, you fought me on this for years, and she'll be like, yeah, I did. I don't know why. She refused to watch Star Wars until her husband made her,
Hmm.
eventually, like years into their marriage, and now she loves Star Wars. And so she's a good example of someone who eventually does. It takes way too long, and sometimes when I'm telling her, hey, you should watch this or you should try this, and she's like, I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm like, you will eventually do it 3 years from now. Just skip the process. And that is where I get into to it with people. I'm like, if you realize, like, why can't you just like bypass it? If I go, oh, you know what? I do that thing. I shouldn't do that thing right now. I should just try it. And and I think changing your mind is really big in that mental space of I've made up my mind on this thing, and that is all I need to know about it. And you could, and it happens with all different kinds of
I think I
things.
learned that lesson at 15. That's the first time I can remember really having an experience that stuck with me on that. And it was
Right.
when Pierce Brosnan's TV show Remington Steele premiered, which was like the month or so before I turned 15. Because I remember that my dad had been watching it for a couple of weeks, saying it's the best show on television. You would love this show. It's right up your alley. And for some reason, I had decided that no, I was not going to like it. I don't want to watch this stupid show. And it was just after my birthday. I got a not birthday party, but like a bunch of us went out for pizza, whatever, my birthday, and people were talking about it. I'm like, my friends like the show. So, and I know it just had been out for a couple of weeks. There's only a couple of episodes. And so the next episode I watched with my dad, and I fucking loved the show. I'm like, he's at this sarcastic, smart ass, in charge of like, I don't know why I related, but I loved it, and so that was a big step for me of, you know what, I shouldn't dig my heels in when someone else says something's good, and it's somebody else.
Uh-huh.
So that's not universal for all changing mind, but that's what I remember distinctly, that I
Yeah.
shouldn't prejudge a TV show. And then I kind of followed up years later, not that many years later, 7 years later, when Batman, the movie, came out with Michael Keaton. And like everybody else on the planet, I had prejudged Michael Keaton as being a crappy Batman because he's a foot too short. He's not muscular. He's a comedy guy. There's no reason he should be good at this. And then Michael Keaton was a damn good Batman. And
Yeah.
seeing it, when I saw it, and that's when I said, you know what, I am never prejudging a casting of a superhero movie again, because
Yeah.
you never know. People have talents in them you haven't seen before. That's why they're actors. And but in general, for
Heath
changing
Ledger.
your mind. Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't know.
People hated the idea of Heath
Yeah.
Ledger, but you had already made that decision, so you didn't prejudge. But I remember, I don't think I made a, I don't think I had a call on it with one way or the other. I always thought that I wanted to see Steve Buscemi as the Joker before they cast Heath Ledger. And so when they announced Heath Ledger, it wasn't the way I was thinking, but I was like, I don't know, maybe. But there was a lot of people who were upset about Heath Ledger as the Joker until we saw it. And I know that people love the Joaquin Phoenix version. I think the Heath Ledger version's better. I think Joaquin
I mean,
Phoenix did a great
I
performance.
mean, I don't feel like he played Batman's Joker. He played a character that was an amazing
Yeah,
character study of what it was. But to me, other than being called Joker, it wasn't Batman's Joker. It's just an amazing character story of a man cracking.
I agree. I also think like it's tough because in that one, um, you don't have any of the or, orchestral chaos that you have from the Joker character because it's such an origin story. So you don't see him getting really fucking lucky that like all the different things that had to happen in all the or just being able the mastermind. He just was kind of a man losing his
Yeah.
mind,
Yeah. I mean,
and
at the
it
the
isn't.
last sequence in Arkham, if you believe it happens and you're not just watching another hallucination, he's very jokery. Like he's got total control of the situation, like Joker should.
Yeah,
Like in that last scene, if that last scene is really happening, but through the whole episode, the whole movie, half the things don't really happen. They're in his head, so who knows if that's even happening, or if anything
yeah,
happened. It could all be in his head, and he's just been in Arkham forever. Who knows?
right.
Um,
I want to say so. I have two examples of when I learned not to prejudge stuff, and one of them will be Patreon exclusive. The other, this is back. We're not doing the Patreon exclusive now. The other
so
example
anyway,
is so anyway. The other example of something is I remember going to I want to say it was Sam Goody when in the mall when I was
Sam
in
Goody's got it. Sam Goody, Sam Goody's got it.
like 12 or 13 years old going and I wanted to buy a CD, but I didn't have like a specific CD in mind, but I had enough money for a CD and my mom was going to let me buy a CD. Probably nothing parental advisory, but still going to get a CD. And my mom goes, "What do you think about this one? I heard these guys are pretty good." And it was the Bare, and she goes, "They're called the Bare Naked Ladies." And I was like, "Mom, I'm not going to listen to something called the Bare Naked Ladies." And and I mean,
I wouldn't
it's
listen to that if I had $1 million.
yeah. I did you catch by the way the episode a few weeks ago that we did about if we could retire? I called it "I would buy you a green dress, but not a real
Not a
green
good. No,
dress."
that's cruel.
Yeah. No, I'm not a huge Bare Naked Ladies fan, but those 3 or 4 songs they have are awesome, and I love them.
I like
Um,
our old apartment. That's my favorite song of theirs.
I think I know that one,
I don't know if it
and
was.
it didn't come up on.
It's not a big hit, but it's one of my. It's I really love it. That, and
Yeah,
they did an ABC song that was really funny, an alternative ABC song, and it's all words
yeah,
where the first letter doesn't make the traditional sound that it makes. Like A is for aisle, like in a movie theater.
yeah. Nice. I feel like I've heard a version of that, and I don't think I knew it was them. But yeah,
But in any case, your mom wanted you to buy some bare naked ladies.
yeah. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. God.
Yeah.
Um,
So, but in the more ethereal sense of changing your mind, I think it is a core precept of skepticism and being a good skeptic to not only be able to change your mind, but to want to.
Yeah.
Like if you're begrudgingly changing your mind, you're doing too much work. My attitude that I actively have tried to foster in my adult life, like it wasn't a natural thing, but I've worked really hard at it, is when I'm, especially in a confrontational debate situation, a disagreement about something factual, to get in the mindset of I do not want to prove that I'm right. I want to test my theory, test my belief, test my knowledge, and find out if it's right.
Right.
And rather be less wrong tomorrow than I am today. So if I'm wrong, I want to know I'm wrong. So I want to change my mind and have a new opinion if it's justified to do so.
Yeah. I'm not great about that.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
want
it
to
was an
be, and
active journey to get
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I will say that there's like a lot of times where I I am I get there begrudgingly. I haven't gotten to the point where I'm trying, where I'm just like trying to find the real thing. I think that brain wise, I want to, but emotionally, I'm not there yet. So like, there's a lot of celebrities where they just rub me the wrong way, whether it's like a little weird speech habit or whatever, and I will not like them. And then I'll listen to an interview or whatever, and I'll be like, they seem so likable.
Russell Brand, I never liked his comedy. And then I heard him on WTF Pod with Mark
Yeah,
Maron, and they were just being themselves, and they were so funny that I loved him after that. And now I've seen him do some stuff that I'm like, he has lost his mind. He's insane.
yeah.
So I've gone, it's a
I
roller
like
coaster
Russell.
with him.
I like Russell Brand. I unfortunately he's taken the red pill. I think with the woke stuff, or not the woke stuff, the anti woke stuff. Like he's so into the anti woke thing. Um, and so he's lost a lot for me. But it's funny that you mentioned the Mark Maron podcast, because my big example that I think of is Sarah Jessica Parker, and I did not like her because, and for the arguably maybe the dumbest reason ever. Um, but she was on the Mark Maron podcast, and I listened to it, and I was like, she sounds so lovely, and like, and like a nice person. Like I would like to, you know. But this is the genuine reason why I did not like Sarah Jessica Parker for years, years. If you watch the trailer for either the Sex and the City movie or the Sex and the City sequel, whichever one they're in the desert for,
Mhm.
she says, I don't know. I think we're not in Kansas anymore. But the way she delivers the line is so melodramatic. And I was like, fuck her. I hate her. And it's stupid. It's really stupid reason. And and then I listened to that podcast with Mark Maron, and I was like, she sounds so nice. Like she sounds like she'd be like a really cool person to hang out with. Sarah likes Sex in the City, so I saw some clips of the new show, and so it begins, or so it goes on, or whatever. And I was like, she's likable. And then I watched. I'm a big fan. It's one of the few Halloween things that I get into. I like
Hocus Pocus.
Hocus Pocus, and in the sequel, do you watch the
Yep.
sequel? The sequel wasn't
I
amazing,
have
but
a
it wasn't.
daughter. Of course, I watched Hocus
Yeah,
Pocus sequel.
it, the Hocus Pocus sequel wasn't amazing, but it was really good. It was a good
It was
sequel,
fun.
and I was so happy that they gave her character more, and her character was my favorite part of
Yeah.
that movie, and because I liked her in the first one, but she wasn't really that famous yet, not compared to Bette Midler, and obviously, uh, Kathy Najimy is the more comedic
At the
actor of.
time, when the first movie came out, she was at her peak.
Yeah, yeah, and so Sarah Jessica Parker was kind of the third wheel, and now she's like a big star, so they had to give her more to work with, and I was like, they did such a good job with her, and I mean, hopefully Sarah doesn't listen to this episode, so that I don't have to watch Sex in the City, but yeah,
So
I like Sarah Jessica Parker now
I,
because I had a bad reason, and it was difficult.
so you have to see. So my introduction to Sarah Jessica Parker was, I don't know, before you were born or when you were a toddler.
Footloose,
She wasn't in Footloose, was she?
yeah,
Um,
she's the friend.
no,
The
I
friend.
don't watch.
She's not the main
I never
girl.
watched Footloose. I don't know. I haven't watched it. I should watch it one day. I haven't gotten
But
around to
you
it.
gotta get loose, foot
Yeah,
loose.
but
Kick off your Sunday
what she did
shoes.
do, she did a movie, and this is not where I was introduced to her. I already knew who she was. She did a movie around the same time as Footloose called Girls Just Want to Have Fun. That was the same story as Footloose, but it was with two girls who like went in Catholic school, and they'd run out of school and turn their Catholic uniforms inside out so they look cool or whatever, hike up their skirts and go to the dance club and dance. And it wasn't a town without dancing, but it was like they were in Catholic school and they weren't supposed to go out dancing at like the disco studio, and they would go out. It was like 87, maybe earlier. But before
Let me
that,
ask you a question
she
about
did
the
a TV
80s.
show called Square Pegs, that lasted 1 or 2 seasons. It was the Big Bang Theory of its time. It was about like nerdy teenagers, the freaks and geeks of its time, if you would. And in it was the most beautiful woman that's ever lived, Jamie Gertz, the perfect woman. Love you, Jamie. We've said that before. But Sarah Jessica Parker was like the main star of it. I have it on DVD, of course. I can lend it to you.
Okay.
It's
Um,
young Sarah Jessica.
the 80s. A quick question about the 80s. So obviously, there's always been
Yes, we
like
drank
we've
from
had.
hoses. Leave me alone.
No, I was gonna say there's always been like in Hollywood. There's been like a oh, if that works, let's steal it kind of mentality. We had sky beams for 10 years in every fucking movie, but the 80s feel like they were just so much more blatant. And they're like, we're not going to steal like an element. We're just going to steal a whole concept, and we will just tool it slightly different so that it's not illegal. And so you got Mac and Me, and what you just described for Footloose, and
E.T. and Mac becomes Mac and Me.
yeah, and it feels like the '80s. There was just
Blue
like
Thunder with Roy Schneider, and then the TV show Airwolf about a different helicopter.
yeah, yeah. I just feel like there was the '80s feels like the prime time for like oh you know what I really like Back to the Future. I can't think of an example. Well, Back to the Future is my favorite '80s movie, so I really like Back to the Future. What if we made it, but instead of a DeLorean, we used like a I don't know like a what I can't think of another
You
'80s
picked the one
car.
thing that nobody did. Nobody did that. Nobody messed with Back to
Yeah,
the Future. Well, I don't think back the '80s is defined by that as much as that's as far as you go back enjoying movies like that. Because the '50s and '60s the movies were all the same too. Like every Western was the same. You know,
yeah.
I
Okay,
mean, the '70s did it. I mean, it was happening in the '70s, in the late '70s at least, because Star Wars came out right afterwards. Battlestar Galactica came out. They did the same kinds of things.
yeah.
But the 80s
I
did do
think
it. The 80s probably did it a lot because they were the most movie studios. Like before the 80s, there weren't
yeah,
as many movie studios. Like things like Miramax and Touchstone and all these smaller studios exploded in the 80s. So there was more opportunity
yeah.
to do that. But yeah, TV
Well,
shows were
we
all the same. Like, hey, look, Knight Rider's got a fancy car. So now Magnum PI, and he drives it like a Porsche because he needs a fancy car. And then
yeah,
there's this other show where the guy just drives a race car. It has nothing to do with the fact that he solves crimes, but he drives a race car. Like, just threw
yeah.
things in.
Well, and I think like the '90s was defined by like not copying, but having the same answer a lot, like the parallel thinking. I think that was the last
Hmm.
episode. I don't think that was earlier this episode, but the parallel thinking. Because you had Deep Impact and Armageddon,
Yeah,
but they both were in development like at the same
yeah.
exact time.
Tombstone
They were
and
they
Wyatt Earp came out within a couple months of
yeah
each other. There's no way I mean, they could have copied each other in the fact of during early pre-production, they heard someone else, another studio is doing this. Let's
yeah
catch up and do it too. But they didn't
yeah.
see the final.
Ants
They
and
didn't.
Bugs
They
Life.
didn't see the final
Yeah.
version to copy.
Yeah, Ants and Bugs Life. Although I've heard Jeffrey Katzenberg was still at Disney when they started storyboarding
Yeah,
Bugs
I'm
Life,
saying
and
they may have known that it was coming,
yeah,
and it's played
yeah.
catch up.
But there was a lot. There was like that parallel release kind of
Yeah.
schedule, and it was like whichever one gets there
I
first.
still don't know the
You
difference
know,
between the Illusionist and the Prestige. The two. I mean, I
I wa-
liked both movies, but I can't tell you which one
yeah,
had which plot.
I watched The Illusionist one time, and I don't remember anything about it. It was Paul Giamatti. No, it was Edward Norton.
If that's not the Prestige, then yes. Edward
Yes.
Norton was one of
No,
Christian Bale was the other. I don't remember which is
Pres-
which.
the Prestige I remember really well because I've watched it 4 or 5 times at least. Because I think that it is the Christopher Nolan masterpiece. I think that
I
he.
Bowie's in
I
it. Of
think
course, it's good.
it's that and Dark Knight are his two masterpieces. I also think um, the World War II movie from a few years ago. Oh damn! Why am I spacing on it? Dunkirk.
Is that World War One?
No,
The two.
World War II.
Okay, I didn't watch it.
The, those three movies are his masterpieces, and people know The Dark Knight, but the other two, like people don't know the Prestige that well compared to uh, um,
Inception,
Inception or
Memento
Interstellar.
was another early good one.
Yeah, Memento's really
Yeah.
good. Memento's like kind of a like that was obviously what got him his start, but people with Christopher Nolan, I do feel like people like the two that I would argue are his worst movies.
Well, it's the two that he was big enough to get the biggest budget and do big fancy
Yeah,
movies that people who don't watch the film but watch the movie, like
yeah,
if you
yeah,
differentiate. Yeah, I remember. I mean, like Prestige and Illusionist, like came out. I don't know if it was exactly the same time, but very similar. So two period pieces about magicians. It was just like completely different, but except they were
yeah,
two period pieces about magicians.
yeah. I remember seeing that. It had to be the same time ish because it was 2006 for The Illusionist, and it was 2006 for The
Yeah, I
Prestige.
thought they came out right at the same time.
That was that was the year that I was living in Denver, and I remembered that. It was a interesting time for film. Anyway, I don't even know that I
Yeah,
want to talk about the subject anymore.
I was gonna say that there's a website I haven't been to in a long time, so I'm assuming it still exists called lesswrong.org. I think if it still exists. That's like a really great skepticism, international skepticism website. Let's see if it exists. Oh, we went to less wrong.com, so I guess they got the .com at some point, and I believe it's the same thing. So it yeah, it is. It's the same site. So lesswrong.com is a great primer on and deep dive, real good essays and stuff, deep dive on skepticism, and that's where I got the phrase was I want to be less wrong tomorrow than I am today. I kind of picked it up from them. I think it's a great description of what
Yeah,
skepticism is, and and the mindset for wanting to change your mind if you're wrong. I want to find out if I'm right or not so I can change my mind and be more right.
yeah. I have similarly, like I know that a big thing is that we've all talked about. We've this phrase that we've all used in society, which is uh, "nobody's perfect, nothing's perfect," and I always just
But
thought that was
practice makes
like,
perfect, but nobody's perfect. So why practice?
yeah. But I always just thought like we're never going to achieve perfection, but we can always keep improving. So it's the same as your last wrong.
There's no secret to toast perfection. There's a dial on the side. You make your selection. Yay toast.
Jesus Christ.
Sorry, it's a little Haywood Banks song. Sorry. Go look up Haywood Banks. He's wonderful.
Yeah. Um,
Yay toast. So anyway, perfection is a journey, not a destination.
yeah. And I think that like we have to be open to okay, Jesus Christ. I think
I
we need
don't
to be
think he's real, frankly. I don't
change my mind. Uh,
I
I
changed my
think
mind since the
that
last episode.
yeah.
One
Um,
vlog ago.
one vlog ago, one vlog later. Um, I th- go ahead.
No, I was just gonna sing my favorite Beatles song. 8 vlogs a week. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Anyway, anyway, um, no, I just think that like changing our mind is a really important piece of that improvement process, and it I think this relates to we've seen this a lot in politics and on the world stage where people don't want to apologize for anything anymore. Um, they don't want to take ownership over being wrong because there's some inherent shame or feeling of inferiority by admitting that you're wrong, and that people feel it. And I never understood that because I eat shit all the time. No. I feel like I'm constantly being proven wrong and like having to say, "Oh, I was wrong," and I am obnoxious and I'm aware of that. So I do when I'm proving someone else wrong, I am a fucking jackhammer about it, and I get that. But I also like if you prove me wrong or you say something and I double check and I'm wrong, I will admit that I'm wrong. Usually I'll couch it a little bit, but I'm pretty good about admitting when I'm wrong on factual things. And and I don't feel ashamed to admit that. I want to get better at being less assertive with wrong ideas. I think that's an important thing, but ultimately, we need to focus on being able to improve. And like, it's not, if you all of a sudden said something wrong and I proved it, I don't think less of you. So I don't understand. And maybe that's how, because my I actually think that my parents were really good about admitting that they were wrong, and my parents were good about changing their mind about stuff.
Yeah, I think that a mistake in our culture is the expression it takes a big man to admit that he's wrong. Because it shouldn't take a big man to admit that he's wrong. It should be everyone can admit that they're
Yeah,
wrong. Like they set it up on a pedestal, like it's a difficult thing to do. Like that implies it's hard to do it, and
yeah.
that shouldn't be our mindset.
No, it should not.
Can I quote the great poet Tim Minchin?
Yes, absolutely.
Who said, "You show me that it works and how it works, and when I've recovered from the shock, I will take a compass and carve fancy that on the side of my cock."
Nice.
That was specifically about homeopathy, but his skepticism thing, like if you can prove to me that it works, then great.
Yeah.
And that's from the beat poem Storm, which I quoted jokingly in the vows I did for my son when my puppet was marrying them for their third time. And my son actually quoted the same poem in his vows to his wife.
Nice. Do you, do you think that the resistance to changing our minds is a lot of ideas that we have, especially, we're not religious, but a lot of ideas that people have seem to be central to who they feel they are. And by admitting that you're wrong about something, you're admitting that who you are is faulty in some way. Like, I'm not talking
Well,
about like,
I mean, if you look psychologically, if we delve into cognitive dissonance, the phenomena, not the podcast, that is the phenomena that if you sincerely and deeply hold a belief and that belief is challenged, your body, your brain interprets that as a pain sensation and rejects it. Where they did studies where they would do simple math problems and the people taking the simple math test could get the math problems with no problem, like percentages and stuff, and which is greater, which is less. And then they'd say to like a conservative, well, we did studies and it showed that 80% of people think abortion is hunky dory great and 20% think it's negative or whatever these numbers are. They do fake stuff. And they give them the same math problems with that data. And the conservatives couldn't do the math problems that they were able to do when it was genericized. And then like with liberals, they did the same thing. Let's say on gun violence, and they gave them statistics that they would not want. People are safer when they have guns. Shooting people is a good thing, whatever. And then when they couldn't do the math problems because their brains literally would not accept the data, would not do logical computations when it was being challenged with beliefs it didn't want to believe.
that makes
And
sense.
so that's definitely ingrained in us to
Yeah,
to not want to change your opinion. And I don't know what the uh, if there's a evolutionary thing to that, being able to, once you think there's something dangerous in the woods, don't say, nah, never mind, there's probably not something dangerous, and those people got eaten more often because it's better to
yeah.
think there's something dangerous and be wrong than think there's not something dangerous and be wrong. I don't know if that's it, but it's definitely it's a psychological thing that you have to work to be out of sometimes because, or just no, don't hold anything that dearly that you'll refuse to listen to other data on.
That makes sense. Yeah. I want to also pull the quote of you saying shooting people is a good thing and
Yeah,
just put it on like
yeah,
a remix it.
for my wife and daughter.
Auto, yeah. No. um, yeah, I think that makes sense that there is because it would explain why even even though I was raised in a way that I think I'm good at admitting when I'm wrong compared to the average person, it's not comfortable or fun. There is a discomfort to it, so I get that aspect, I guess. And so that might be a more evolutionary thing than a nature versus nurture. So
I mean, or that it could be nurture. It could be that something about our upbringing creates that cognitive dissonance situation too. And like,
yeah,
say, religion is a good example because it's like, I always say, you can be an atheist without being a skeptic. You can still believe in a million bad things, just because you got one question right. But it's hard to be a good skeptic and not be an atheist eventually, because if you start applying skepticism to magic, it goes away. And so religion certainly is the opposite of skepticism and has to teach you believe this no matter what, no matter what your senses tell you, no matter what evidence tells you, you have to believe this. So there is a hardcore training yourself out of changing your mind.
Yeah. By the way, you said something that made me think of something. Oh, Jesus Christ. Um,
Always praying.
like I'm getting like phone calls like crazy right now. There was an episode of Paul's podcast that he and I talked about doing that we've never done that I think might be really fun to do with you and him. And it would make more sense on his podcast probably than ours. But it just made me think of it, which was a thing that I've always found interesting that I wanted to talk about in pop culture is the idea of when writers are writing pop culture or writing sci-fi or fantasy or anything else, they put an atheist with real world rules into a world without real world rules,
Uh-huh.
and so you get like Han Solo, and the Han Solo is an example that I would say is just
I don't believe in the
it's
Force while he's levitating stuff.
yeah. Like I think the Han Solo example is kind of like there's enough inconsistency. I love Star Wars. Star Wars is one of my favorite franchises, but there's enough inconsistency that I don't take it that seriously. But you do get like, like I'm trying to think if it was Tony Stark or who, and you're like, if Tony Stark's a full on atheist, it doesn't make any sense after you've met Thor, and it's just like, oh, like literally the laws of physics that govern us that have created skeptical atheists in our real world don't apply in those worlds, but you're putting skeptical real world atheists into that world.
Of course,
And
the
I
Marvel universe is messed up because they have, you know, early on Thor was like, I'm just an alien who's more powerful and lives longer. You call it magic, we call it, they call it science. We call it the same thing. And then the later
yeah,
ones, oh no, he's full on magic,
yeah,
and even like Doctor Strange, like the first Doctor Strange, their magic was very much following rules, so energy we didn't know as scientists, but really,
yeah,
and then but then like in the Thor, in Thor Ragnarok, Doctor Strange like snap his fingers, there's beer, snap his fingers, there's this. Like he wasn't doing the magic he was taught in the first movie. Like they Marvel movie universe changed their position. They went from
yeah,
science that looks like magic to magic, like in the course of the movies.
yeah. I think like it kind of actually applies right now is the idea of
Yeah,
an atheist in that situation would change their mind. A a Christian or a Jewish person or any other
yep.
religion would not necessarily change their mind because they're believing something without real world evidence to whatever degree. And so if the existence of Doctor Strange does not nullify the existence of Jesus or
Yeah, the Old
or
Testament is full of magic.
yeah,
Moses fights against Pharaoh's magicians to prove he's more powerful. There's other gods in the Old
yeah,
Testament. God is just more powerful than them.
yeah. And I think that that is part of the issue like that I see in that structure is when you're writing, and I'm assuming that these are most likely reasonable religious people who are vaguely religious that are writing these things because I don't think an atheist would write it that way. But I also don't think that they're trying to be condescending to or like or straw
But
manning atheists. They're just saying, oh well, I think we all, when presented with evidence, would have a different feeling, or we would all believe our beliefs, and this is a belief system. The idea that atheism is a belief system or a religion. And so in keeping with that, they're like, well, I wouldn't stop believing in Jesus, so why would they stop being an atheist? And it's like because the whole if you're doing like you said before, if you're being a skeptic correctly or as thoroughly as possible, you'll change your mind. Is the big difference between a lot of skeptics and a lot of atheists. Not obviously
yeah,
everybody,
it's
obviously,
funny because it's
a lot of religious
a
people.
lot of times in movies that where magic is real, but there are skeptics about magic. Doesn't need religion, magic or ghosts or whatever, the
Yeah,
supernatural. The difference between like reality and that is in those movies, the supernatural things happen. You know,
yeah,
it's like the
exactly.
things are actually happening. So yeah, why would you be a skeptic about it when it's happening versus
Yeah,
real life where you hear stories that it happened, but nobody has a picture. Nobody is really experiencing it. And
yeah.
yeah, But yeah, I'm with you. That's always a fun topic. But I think it's
I'll
funny that you have to go out your way in your Christian movie to make miracles happen to prove it's true that don't happen in real life. I'm like you're giving up what you really believe when in your fictional version a miracle happens. The person dying suddenly jumps out of bed perfectly healed. That doesn't happen in real
hey,
life because it's different. Okay,
before the
Grandpa Joe
invention
in
of
Willy Wonka, but
science and photographic evidence and video evidence, there were a lot of miracles happening real world.
sure.
I don't know why they stopped, but um,
Angels are
I
shy. They don't want their picture taken.
yeah, I think we've been going for 45 minutes.
Ah, you sound like my wife.
Yeah, it's starting to just rub.
Rub me the wrong way.
Um, yeah. Um, so I think maybe we should wrap it up because I'm getting hungry and it's our second record of the night. What do you think?
Yeah, we're gonna go out to Peak of the Vine, a little wine bar in downtown Apex, and grab some food from one of the restaurants nearby because they don't have food at Peak of the Vine, but you can bring food. We'll probably sit
Nice.
outside, have some wine. Maybe they also have beer. I'll have beer. I'll have wine. We'll eat some food from somewhere in beautiful downtown Apex, park in the nice big free parking lot of Apex, and have a wonderful time. Come visit Apex. That's my plug. Come to downtown
Yeah.
Apex. Visit us.
It's it's the peak of North
It is
Carolina.
the peak of good living, and it was like #1 small town to live in America numerous times in Money Magazine. Numerous
I
times.
like to think of it as Republican carry, but okay.
Oh, we're 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Republican, 1/3 unaffiliated. Our entire town council and our mayor are all Democrats. So it used
Good.
to be all Republican, and over the last 10 years, it changed.
Good. All
And
right,
we like to
everybody.
think of ourselves as Carrie Light, 1/3 the snobbery.
Oh, yeah. Anyway. So anyway, yeah. You have anything you want to plug?
I just plugged. Come to Apex.
Yeah.
Come to my
Good.
town.
So I'll plug our YouTube channel. Is just go to YouTube and look up talking about the big stuff. You'll see our big orangey red logo. Um, if you are enjoying the show and you want to get it a little early and you want to hear some of the naughty bits that we cut out,
Who naughty
uh,
bits?
naughty bits, go to patreon.com/ talking about the big stuff
Not
and
not the world's best big stuff?
no, not world's best big stuff.
Okay.
And you can subscribe. It's $3 a month right now. That gets you, like I said, it gets you the Friday show on Monday, and it gets you just audio version. Right now we're not doing video, but if we get enough Patreon patrons, we will. Um, it also gets you like we said before, the naughty bits. Like you'll be able to hear Matthew's definition of churd
Not
and
my
what
definition of churd. It's the definition of churd.
okay. You'll also be able to hear whatever the stuff was that I said earlier, up from the when I said
Um, I
Patreon
I think it's
exclusive.
about I think it was about Timex watches. Something about taking a licking and keeping on ticking.
Yeah, yep, exactly. So anyway, if you want to support the show, you could do that. You could also please give us a rating on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Um, uh, if you're watching on YouTube, thumbs up, please. And
Oh, thanks for talking about the big stuff with us. Hope we changed your mind.
that was the worst one
Well,
yet.
I
You,
wasn't ready for it because I was thinking about it, but then you
I
pointed at me and it's YouTube, and I thought you were going to say subscribe and ring the bell for notifications, but
why don't
no,
you
you just jumped right into pointing at me.
change my big stuff? Anyway, all right. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye, everybody.